Welcome back to the Dream Together podcast. My name is Clarence Hill, and I am excited one more time to be with Scotia Moore, Lee Rowland, and John Mark Hart. We're digging deeper into the letter from a Birmingham jail. And in this one, this is the moment where we discuss a creative tension point. All tension is not bad. There's actually some things that we can get comfortable with that may need to change, but there's a right way to do it. Join us as we dig into Dr. King's philosophy on addressing issues on time and in a spirit of peace and brotherhood. Welcome back, friends. My name is Clarence Hill, and I'm here with my friends John Mark, Scotia, and Lee. And it's been great walking through these episodes to discuss the letter from a Birmingham jail. Our goal is to create a space where we can have conversation so that we can get to a place of healing, restoration, and a new tomorrow, because our society is divided. And it's kind of like we are finding ways to be divided over every next topic that comes up. So we also believe that many of you out there want to see something good and something beautiful for the spaces where we live, and especially for our children. So that's why we talk about dreaming together. We want you to invite your friends, share this podcast with others. We're not just dreamers who sit around talking about things, but all of my friends here are action-oriented. We spend the majority of our time figuring out if we have an ounce of strength left to do more with our lives and with our time. And many of you that are listening, you might even be wondering, what can I do with my life? What can I do that matters? It's like people want to be a part of something greater. This is an invitation. We believe that even by having this conversation around the letter from a Birmingham jail, we're actually digging into the life of an individual, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who grabbed something that was greater than his lifetime. He did not enter his 40s, yet his life has impacted our world, the way many of us think. And this letter embodies so much of that, those things that we believe we can learn from. Let's learn together. Let's say good morning to the team. Well, it might be evening or afternoon where you are, but we'll say good morning because we're talking about going to a new day. So good morning. John Mark, how are you?
I'm feeling good.
Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I thought you said you had 6 children.
I do have 6 children.
I'm just teasing. And Scotia has 10 children. Are you all right?
I'm doing good.
Okay.
Yep.
Grandchildren, are you all right?
I'm doing well.
Now, look, I like to say children are a joy. I do think children get a bad rap in our society.
They do.
Right? But
my kids make my life fun.
Oh, my goodness. They keep me grounded.
Keep me young.
Yeah. Same
And
here.
art.
Honestly, some of my most challenging moments of kind of hitting that moment, like, this costs a lot. This costs so much to try to be a pastor and someone who's not just in the pulpit on a Sunday, but is making a difference during the week. And you want to keep a healthy marriage. And you want to be on top of everything in life and keep up with all this going on. When my kids get me on Friday nights for our family Sabbath time to watch a movie and hang time together, it literally feeds my soul.
Sure.
And it kind of recovers my why. And Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, a lot of it was centered around his children and the hope for when he was gone. And I do think it's a little toxic for us not to think about our children while we do these things.
For sure.
And if you're a young person listening to this, I want you to know that we do what we do because we care about you.
That's right.
We believe that there are more people standing around who want to make things better, and we want to create that space. Why do y'all keep doing it? I know why I keep doing it. Why do y'all put yourselves, why do you sacrifice like this?
I think one of us was talking about it earlier. I preached at a church January 1 with a congregation that didn't look like me. And they were really
They had hair.
no, they didn't have a whole lot of it. They were senior.
That's great.
They were
That's
senior
great.
people, and they didn't look like me. And we didn't worship the same. And these two little girls, one brought in a candle, and the other one brought in another little scepter kind of like thing. And at the end of my message, I said, if there were time, I would ask each and every one of you to stand up with me and point to those young ladies and apologize to them and tell them that, listen here, I owe you an apology, because if I leave here today, I will leave you a worse America. That's scary. I will leave you a worse America than I grew up in. And the America that they grew up in, they were 60, 70, 80. It was pretty jacked up. Excuse my vernacular. There was poverty. There was racism. There was misogyny. There was hatred. I mean, there was greed. The America that they grew up in. In fact, they had songs but saying, let's get it together. I mean, what's going on? I mean, there were songs that were famous then, and so the congregation, you could tell they really, really connected with me then. And after my message, several of them came up to me and just said, "Man, what can I say?" And so, why do I do it? I believe these babies deserve better than we're giving them. The environment, the culture, the hatred. I mean, it was kind of jacked up. I mean, America had some issues, but I didn't grow up afraid to go to school.
Right.
I mean, so it's just so many things that are messed up now. And again, people that came before us, Dr. King and many, many others that said, hey, let's try to get it right. Artists in their songs and their art said, let's try to fix it. So while I'm still here today, man, as I'm going to fight till the last breath, I want to see our babies have better. I ran into one yesterday at one of my former students. I ran into this student yesterday, and this student said, Mr. Rowland, I'm no longer a mess.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you never were.
Oh, yeah.
You never were a mess. You were trying to figure some things out. I always thought you were a neat kid. And you could just see that kid just light up and everything. And so I'm here. I like adults. I love kids. They're innocent, and they are what we all should be: forgiving, loving. My grandson plays with the kid next door. They're completely different, and you should see them just laying down in the grass. Never met each other. Never met each other. 5 years old, and they're just laying down in the grass. I'm like, this is the way we ought to be, America.
Yeah. We want a dream-driven conversation, not a toxic, pain-driven conversation.
Love.
And
love.
What I mean by that is there are pain points, but it's like I can hear both sides of the conversation as we share. We focus on upstream solutions in the Strong Together movement, because we found that both sides of the political aisle really agree on upstream. For example, we want every child to be able to get to the place where they have a healthy environment with their own fathers and mothers, right? Because a lot of times the educational system is burdened because of what they're missing in the home, then gets dumped onto the teachers.
Right.
And that's just one bit of the pain. But again, I just want to reiterate, when we talk about America, we're having this conversation around the letter from a Birmingham jail because it's rich to take the time to appreciate the contributions. Because I think if there's a way that we can say, well, America's worse than ever, we got to clear that up. Because you're going to lose friends on both sides. When we say things are worse, when I say something like that, I'm simply saying the families are more broken than ever. But the things that Dr. King and several others across several ethnic groups have given us in America is more than so many have all in the world. So we really want to make sure everyone understands that we're not here to destroy what is set in front of us at all. But when I hear you share, Lee, and I want to hear John Mark and Scotia answer this question too. The kids are kids, and man, by the time they figure out what's causing me pain, they're going to be 20 years old, or they will already have maybe taken a wrong or sour path. They need us to create pathways and bridges to tomorrow for them too. Yeah.
And let me just say, I don't want people to feel guilty. What I want people to do is to be prompted by love and look through the eyes of these children, what you can see back in their pupils, and see that they just want, they want to see in us what we want to see in them.
That's right. That's right. We want to remove this wall of division.
Yeah.
And get the Lee Rollins of the world who have brought solutions, get those answers out to the platform. Scotia, why are you in this conversation?
I mean, mine is brief. It's the same. I mean, I don't center on my children, or on the next generation. It is, just one step outside of center. But for me, like if we were talking about a life saying or a life verse, for me speaks from speaking the truth in love. Like I can't not do that. And I'm constantly like, am I telling the truth? So sometimes I get nudged by my brother over here to like, you need to be more clear about that, or, you need to take the gloves off a little bit more, which is my bent, actually. So I'm like, I need to put the gloves on. I need to put them on. But to speak the truth, but to do that centered on love. So like, this is my expression of loving my neighbor, is to do this work of weaving together fabric where,
that's right.
It's just, they're just holes. Like there's nothing even to bring, no two sides to bring together. You just have to weave in that space. But then where there's something that's torn and separated, to do the work of mending that back together.
That's great language.
So it's to speak the truth in love. Yeah.
John Mark, before we read our next part of letter, what's your why?
The way you said it a second ago is, how do you stay engaged and joyful in the work? And I think the work we're doing in South Oklahoma City, and I say we because it's a team. We got a wonderful team. But the work that we're doing is really, really fun and often really, really painful. And so we do so much mentoring. We got after school programs. We're doing counseling and recovery ministry. We're serving in the school. We're doing advocacy work, activism work. We're doing, clinics and all sorts of different things, medical clinics, and engaging the education system, engaging immigration issues, just so much stuff. And it's fun. It's joyful. I love the people I get to work with every day. But, there's pain. There's a lot of pain in the community, and you invest deeply with people, and then they get killed. You walk with people, and then their families blow up. You walk with people, and then they get put in prison for 20 years. And there's a lot of secondary trauma, and there's a lot of just physical exhaustion. There's a lot of spiritual and emotional discouragement. And I think, as I'm thinking honestly about like why, three things come to mind. One is, why do I stay engaged in the work? A big part of it is the friends I get to walk with.
Sure.
We like to quote the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So friends like you guys, but friends like my wife, Candace, Reed and Ashley Abear, Chauncey and Morgan Shiloh, Jared and Caitlin Stevenson. Everybody listening to us doesn't know who any of these people are, but we've been like ride or die partners through a lot of ditches together for a lot of years. And when I get discouraged, they pick me up. Second reason is I just actually love these people and think they're worth the rest of my life.
That's it.
And I think the children, and I think the ones that, like, I've tried to walk with their parents and watch them go through pain, but I see that their hard work is helping their kids have a better opportunity. Now, I want their kids to have an even better opportunity.
There you go.
That long-term work. And I think the third answer is, I'm going to be lying to y'all if I don't on the podcast say, it's just Jesus. It's Jesus. Jesus loves me, and every day he enters into my pain and picks me up and takes care of me. And that spiritual experience of relationship with God is what keeps me going, brother.
It's a rich life.
It is a rich life.
I mean, it's a rich life.
It's an adventure.
I mean, you when you get to the point where you're like, all of my energy, I want it directed towards someone who could not help themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just hard for me to think, regardless of who people say they worship, how could you disagree with a philosophy that says, yeah, you can succeed in life, but what are you going to do with your little suburban home and your nice vehicles? Are you just going to drive past, quote, them and leave them nameless? You know, but part of entering into pain is learning people's names. You can hear the fact that Dr. King was living in a time of pain. And I love this quote here from the letter from a Birmingham jail. He says, "Moreover, I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow, provincial, outside agitator idea. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its bounds."
It's good.
Wow.
But y'all, that's too much to talk about here. I mean, I can just think of, you know, Lee says this a lot in his presentations, and who are the names? You say Pookie and Nene, or
Shanae, all of them.
Shanae.
Yeah. And Bubba.
If we can, please bring us into that, because I love the concept is just whole.
Yeah, and I think everybody holds value, and so there are some people that we've attached some names to, and it really has a negative connotation. I want us to flip that and understand that's a person, and it could be any of us. And so I have this conversation almost daily. As I know my friends right here, you all are unbelievable people. Unbelievable people. You love and fear God for those people that don't, but these guys really do. I love them. But what I want my audiences to understand is, number one, you want Pookie to have hope.
That's right.
Okay, you want him to have opportunity. If you don't believe in your brother's keeper, reconsider that and understand that the life you save by saving your brother might be your own.
Right.
Number one.
Good.
Number two, my friends that sit around me, if you take away their hope, they're different people. Yeah. And so we are that lady that denied that help and that might smell. We are that person that needs to stay somewhere else. And so, Clarence, friends, I just think it's everybody, and unfortunately, again, we've got some names we call some people Joe and different things like that. All of these people hold value, and all of them need hope and love. And if we were in their shoes, would we not want it? That's what prompted you to stop, and what's prompted me to care for those kids the way I did is it could have easily been me. And one member in the audience, when I said it could have been me, that person who is now a doctor says it should have been me.
Wow.
And so when more of us understand just the grace that was given us, then I think we start to shed this pride and disregard to others.
Lee, the paragraph that Clarence just read to us has within it a sentence, which is one of the most famous sentences that Dr. King said. And every year when MLK Day comes around, if you log on to social media,
you'll see it all.
There's a whole lot of people that may or may not have read this letter, but they have grabbed hold of that sentence.
Yeah.
And it's getting posted everywhere. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I think that sentence grabs hold of us for a reason, but part of what we can do is kind of put that in context. Why did he say that? He said that because he, on purpose, drove from Atlanta to Birmingham because there's people suffering in Birmingham. And now his critics are saying, you're making trouble in our community by bringing this suffering to the surface, by exposing our problems. And his response, he gives a number of responses, but his response right here is saying, hey, we're all interconnected. It's rooted in a concept of human solidarity and love. King would often talk about beloved community. Where are we going towards beloved community, where we all love one another? And because we're so interconnected as human beings and we all have dignity, if as a society, even as a world, we're okay with profound suffering and injustice and oppression that devalue some people, then that's like cancer that will spread. And there's a call, a moral call, to look for those places of pain, and instead of running away from them, instead of hiding them, run in to bring healing and to bring change.
Yeah, that it reminds me of a conversation my husband and I had several years back, and I think I was just having like this moment of a pity party, and I was saying, "Man, it's hard here." Like we had been kind of trudging along for some years, just scraping by, and frustrated, and some of those frustrations were centered around the disconnect. And I'm not from Oklahoma City. I'm from the DC area, where, similar to Martin Luther King, I grew up in this more insulated Black environment. You know, in an area where it's still today the county that I grew up in was the wealthiest, predominantly Black county in the country. And so, you know, some of these issues were just like, I didn't even know there were issues anymore. I was like, oh, that's you guys, my parents, my grandparents. That's not relevant today. And then I moved to a different part of the country and I started seeing things that I had not seen before. And I told my husband one day, man, it's hard here. It'd be a little easier if we lived in Atlanta, or if we lived, you know, where I grew up, or something like that. And my husband just stopped, and he's a very gracious person, but he just kind of stopped me in my tracks and said, it's not okay for some of us to do well in some places. We should all be able to do well and to flourish wherever we're called to live. And so that is our part, is to make this a flourishing place so that all can flourish. And so that statement from my husband has been what like caused me to put on my big girl boots and like, okay, keep walking, sis, and stop, and for a moment, stop complaining. So when we talk about, you know, some of the challenges and the fatigues and, you know, of carrying this message and this work of peacemaking, it's that. It is saying, you know, it's not okay for some of us to be doing okay in a few places here and there, but that there's this interrelated, this interconnectedness, the idea of the loom, which is the name of, you know, a publication that I've worked on, but like this idea of this weaving together. You can't snag and pull a thread over here in the garment of our human relationships across this nation and the world, and it not pull something else tight somewhere else, or cause a hole in the fabric in general.
And the flip side that you mentioned earlier is, he's saying injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. But you were talking about that. It's not just that injustice over there could lead to injustice here, but your healing can also become my healing.
That's right. That's right.
And so we're talking about moving, not just, when we talk about from moving us, them to us, we, it's not moving from we hate them to we help them. It's moving from we are one family.
Yes.
And we are healed together. And my healing can mean your healing can mean my healing.
I also want to talk about that interrelatedness of all communities. And I think what the audience may wonder, well, what qualifies this group to be able to speak on this terms, on this subject. And, you know, as I think about my friends here, I think of the community that you serve in and the ministry in which you all go about saying, all of you guys matter. I've seen this gentleman here work with people that have come to this church that were in tremendous need. And he shared with me, Lee, this is on my heart. This is a priority with this individual. This is bringing me some grief and some struggle. And I don't have to, he never said it, I don't have to deal with that, but he has to. As I look at the ministry that her husband leads or the work that they do with children, the interconnectedness of all communities. And I think if we can get more people if we could just double that, if we could just increase this for us to understand there's an interrelatedness of all communities. We're all family. I was thinking when I first looked at this quote, it is unfortunate to me that certain industry or certain institutions are taking the lead and trying to talk about love, but you all have to Google all of this. But, there was a song that says, we are family. And I was like, and people, those songs resonate with people all over the world. You all have to Google this. There was a song that says, we are the world, we are the children. And there were artists that took a back seat. They didn't get to have a lead, but they wanted the world to see that we are joined in looking at everybody's humanity, that there's an interconnectedness. You all have to forgive me. I speak with a lot of energy and whatever, but it's just who I am. I want to see this. I want to see us realize this interrelatedness of all communities. And as you said, I don't want to, Black preachers are bad about this. You already preached on it, so I need to let it alone. But what you said about this whole idea of let us not look down upon that other person and say, whoa, if something happens to you, it could happen to me. Let the world know that what's happening to you is happening to you, because if you're suffering, and that great book that a lot of us read says that we grieve with those who grieve and we rejoice with those who rejoice. And those are things we need to live out.
Yeah, he's saying he wasn't going to sit idly by, not be concerned with what happens in Birmingham, even though he's in Atlanta. So I think part of this is saying, okay, there are people who feel like, hey, all of this talk about addressing the homeless and the unhoused, all of this addressing of those who are aging out of foster care, human trafficking, all of the things that are challenges in our society today, there's one voice that would say, hey, no, just go in the church and preach the gospel. I think the point that I stand on is that I love the fact that someone else has the freedom to respond to how they want to live out the call of God or to answer the deals. I think in this one, King is speaking up because someone challenged him on what he was doing. So it's like, yes, if you're like, hey, I'm not for that. I'm driving by those people, or guess what? Those kids in that school, they're not my children.
Right.
My family's fine. That's just, for me, that's where I don't agree with how I choose to live my life or how I teach my children. We teach our children, hey, when you're on the playground, you probably won't be the kid that's ignored. But I need you to use your reputation, your confidence, your strength, your beauty, and look for the kids that are ignored, because we're aware of depression and suicide and the trauma that kids are living in. So it's life-giving to me to sit in somewhat of a posture like Dr. King. But I think part of what heals divides is for those of us who are actively involved in this to also not sit around and finger point at those who don't. And this is also an invitation for those who may be listening to this because they know one of us here and you're not involved, and you could have been judgmental about it. Why does it have to be where I'm going to attack this other group if I'm not going to get involved? And this philosophy to say what should drive involvement, I think it's a rich thought to say it's all interconnected. It's all interconnected. That kid that we taught our children to say hello to, maybe they will grow up 6 or 10 years from now. And I hate to hit such a point of pain. But this recent school shooter said there was one person she texted before. She said, "You're probably going to hear about this on the news. I'm going to die today." But she had one person she talked to. I don't know. I'm not justifying the action at all.
No.
But I'm saying, what if we were teaching our children to look for those who needed our love the most instead of being cliquish? And I just think adults are cliquish too.
They are.
I think some of our church communities can be cliquish. I think some of us in our companies in the business world can become cliquish, and it's just them and those people. Those people, is that country? Those people over there. And I love his argument.
Clarence, I want to add a piece to this. So we're talking a lot about love. Love everybody. We're talking about a lot of interconnectedness. Be kind to everybody. Last episode, we talked about King starting this letter by building common ground with people who disagreed with him, saying they're people of genuine goodwill. And I can imagine people listening to this discussion wrestling with, yeah, but there's some people that aren't people of genuine goodwill.
True.
And there are injustices, and there are real suffering. And are we just going to like hold hands and sing Kumbaya about that? Or are we willing to do with it? So I think a few paragraphs after the one we just read, there's another paragraph that I want to read and talk about how they go together. Because the criticism here was not just you came from out of town to love people. It was you came out of town in part to expose our pain so that we have to deal with it. And so here's a quote. I'll read it. Dr. King says, "You may well ask, why direct action? Why sit-ins, marches, and so forth? Isn't negotiation a better path? You are exactly right in your call for negotiation. Indeed, this is the purpose of direct action. Nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and establish such creative tension that a community has consistently refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks so to dramatize the issue that it can no longer be ignored. I just referred to the creation of tension as part of the work of the nonviolent resistor. This may sound rather shocking, but I must confess that I am not afraid of the word tension. I have earnestly worked and preached against violent tension. But there is a type of constructive, nonviolent tension that is necessary for growth. Just as Socrates felt that it was necessary to create a tension in the mind so that individuals could rise from the bondage of myths and half-truths to the unfettered realm of creative analysis and objective appraisal, we must see the need of having nonviolent gadflies to create the kind of tension in society that will help men to rise from the dark depths of prejudice and racism to the majestic heights of understanding and brotherhood. So the purpose of direct action is to create a situation so crisis-packed that it will inevitably open the door to negotiation. We therefore concur with you in your call for negotiation. Too long has our beloved Southland been bogged down in the tragic attempt to live in monologue rather than dialogue. So here's Dr. King pressing us a little bit, and he's going to keep pressing us more as the letter continues. But he's saying there is a universal bond of love and family, but we're not always living that. And sometimes we've got to move into a space, in this case, of protest and of nonviolent civil disobedience, but we've got to take tensions that are already there, but are being ignored because it's convenient for a lot of people to ignore them, and bring them up to the surface where they can't be ignored anymore, so that people who are wanting to ignore a conversation can't do so anymore. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but I think as we're talking about loving everybody, loving neighbors, loving enemies, love doesn't mean we don't have the hard conversations.
Yeah.
And sometimes what love means is, hey, I love those who are suffering, and I love people who may be benefiting from their suffering, but I'm not going to be neutral about that situation of inequity.
Yeah.
I'm going to step into raising my voice alongside and supporting those who are suffering to force a conversation, not with the goal of humiliating those who disagree, but with the goal of seeking real peace together.
Yep.
I can be real brief here. Throughout the letter, we will hear the word, from now on in the letter, we will hear the word tension. And I'm trying to draw our audience into how this connects and the analogies that we can find here. And I know that I'm a better husband because of the tension that my wife has addressed. Without that tension in our marriage, I would be smug and content, and there would be some things. I'm not the best, and I'll keep working on it. I would give myself a better grade than she would give me. Okay, but
the example is really good.
But I like to let audiences know we don't get to grade ourselves.
That's
we
right.
don't get to do that. We don't get to grade ourselves.
Lady.
And so the crisis or the tension that she has brought to life has caused me to say, "Whoa, you got to check yourself before you wreck yourself or wreck our relationship here," and things like that. And I want our audience to understand the tension. There is a good tension, and he's tried to bring attention to that. It's not all bad. That's not all bad. Ask my wife.
So you made such a good point. You said you don't get to grade yourself.
No.
I mean, I think that part is just so rich because it's easy to look in the mirror or to begin to drive your own thoughts on a matter. And I think, again, to me, this is kind of that smooth skin deal where it's like, okay, are you in the game? I mean, meet someone. For some, the philosophy or the belief that they are driving may be very practical, very true. There are beliefs that say, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Very, very true. But of course, Dr. King is like, that's unfair if there are no bootstraps in the first place. But that's the voice of someone who's entered into the conversation. And it's actually a biblical story of Queen Esther, where she was in the palace. So in the Dream Clock, I use this term, the palace, a lot, but the palace represents our place of comfort. It's being around that people group or that community, our wealth class, our ethnic group that we're used to. But the palace can put you to sleep. The palace can make you disconnected from the pain of others. And Esther, in this Bible story, she was now the queen. And all of the Jews were going to get annihilated, genocide, literally. And she was actually considering not saying something to her husband because it would challenge her life. Now I just say it again. Everybody else was about to die. The man who raised her and brought her in as an orphan included. And she was actually asking herself, should I be involved? So her self-grade, she was okay with where she was. And even in the Bible, it says she was grieving. She was grieving over the news. Like, oh, this is so bad for y'all.
She wasn't doing anything. Until
Right.
Mordecai came to bring the tension to the servant.
Yeah, he brought, and you know what she did? She in essence wrote a check. She sent Mordecai a change of clothes. So Mordecai was in mourning, sackcloth and ashes, and she had them send a change. So she did a little clothing drive. And so a lot of times we do get involved in things. So we may go to a couple galas or a fundraising ball. But I just want to challenge everybody. There's still a moment to get close enough to where you can hear someone's name and hear stories and begin to share in the pain. You may not be someone who weeps easily like some of us. You may be hard, but there's something about empathy and trying to share in that pain together. And then asking them, how do you see this situation? Is it worth me coming out of my palace to go reach into that space of pain? I just think it was a good point.
Yeah. And on the note of pain, you know, I'm the shorty of my family at 5'10", and the only ones that are 8 of my children are taller than me. And then, you know, the 9 and 11-year-old are very on their way.
Okay.
So I think I'm going to end up being the shortest in my family. They go all the way up to 6'8" so far. And growing pain is not, it's more than just a saying in my household. Like we have, we have the stretch marks and we have the Slaughters, whatever that thing is with your knee when you're growing really fast and stuff is separating and there's pain. We've had kids that had to go through physical therapy because their muscle growth could not keep up with how fast their bones were growing and they were in excruciating pain. Growth is painful. And he talks about tension being a necessary part of growth.
Yes.
And so when we're avoiding tension, we're actually stunting our growth. We are arresting our development when we avoid tension. And a lot of us spend a lot of effort trying to dance around and to just avoid the discomfort, the awkwardness, the potential brokenness in relationships that can come with highlighting tension. But when we do that, we're actually, instead of growing together, we're actually stunting ourselves. We are and it doesn't matter how old you are. We're protecting our immaturity. And it's not, it's strange or it's something, there's something wrong when you see someone who remains a baby their entire life.
That's right.
And so that type of development is the result of tension. And so we don't want to, like to some degree, we want to make the growth, we don't want to harm and tear and break. But at the same time, there are just points where, it is what it is. And the tension is what it is. And we have to learn from it and grow through it.
I got to tell a story of how some of my neighbors did this for me, pulled me into tension that I needed for growth. But I live in a community that has a lot of first-generation immigrants coming from situations where they were in situations maybe where there was a lot of poverty, violence, maybe cartels were making life very difficult. And they came to the United States and have faced a lot of struggle. And they have been great neighbors to me. They welcomed me into my neighborhood, into their neighborhood, I should say, not the other way around. And when my family has had run through hard times, they brought me clothes. They've just been great neighbors to me. But as our friendship has grown, they've also shared their stories. And one of the ways that pulled me is one time getting involved in some advocacy work where we were walking from the border between San Diego and Tijuana, Mexico, to Los Angeles on a pilgrimage that was drawing attention to some problems in our immigration system. And I had been carrying a lot of stuff in my soul of the pain of my friends and neighbors for a long time. But there was one night, probably the second or third night of this walk, in which in the evening as we were eating dinner, somebody led us in praying the prayer of the farm worker struggle, which was written by Cesar Chavez. And the first petition of that prayer says, "Show me the suffering of the most miserable so that I may know my people's plight." And as we were praying that, something just like broke loose in my soul. And there's a bunch of my friends who had been hurting, whose families had been ripped apart, who had been exploited, had wages stolen from them, that I was upset about it, but it wasn't really leading me to a constructive place. And I wept that night for the first time for it. And came back with a sense of renewed purpose. Like, hey, there's some friends that we've prayed together. We've helped each other out through hard times. We've sung together. But there's a system that is broken that is ripping their families apart. And I haven't done anything to change that system. And so we started moving into more advocacy on that issue, which did bring tension to the surface. And there were some people that didn't like us moving into that space. But bringing it to the surface, one of the things that we found was there was actually some people of goodwill who didn't know how important this issue was, that when we started doing advocacy events, some people with power to change started reaching out to us saying, we didn't understand this. Will you tell us? I was a pastor it was a baby church at that time. This was early days. We probably had 60 people showing up at church. We started a small congregation. And people with power to change the law are reaching out to me telling us, what should the policy be now? And I didn't know I had agency like that.
That's it.
But part of what it was neighbors who loved me enough to help me feel their pain so I could grow. And then now we are together able to bring tensions to the surface where there can be actual change.
Yeah, yeah,
Love it.
yeah. That's beautiful.
good.
That's beautiful. That so many of these narratives have woven the loom, this whole truth together so well that you actually said, for the first time, I wept for someone else's pain. It's not going to affect you. You could walk back to your, quote, palace, so to speak. And we also mentioned even in a marriage, you know, you're like, I'm okay. And for some, it's almost like a shock moment. Mm-hmm. Or you have a spouse and all of a sudden they bring up the D word or separation.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and you're like, what in the world? But it tells you if two people can be living under the same roof.
Yeah.
And one person's heart is departing and just getting to the point where they're saying, you just must not understand me. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this is ever. And so now they're having, just follow me for a second. They're having a conversation in their own head, their own mind. And that's almost what makes it more dangerous. Mm-hmm. You want to be able to have that conversation in marriage between one another so you can share and learn and catch it before that heart gets cold. So now take it from a marriage to society. If that's a challenge we face in our own marriage, when most people are married in the same ethnic group and the same wealth class, why then would we think it's going to be easier with perfect strangers from two different ethnic groups, a different vantage point of American history, where all of a sudden we're just going to kumbaya and never have to talk about anything? We're going to have to do the same thing, I believe, that Lee mentioned to us. We're going to have that moment where hopefully that spouse figures out how to produce creative tension without losing that marriage covenant to where we can talk. Put it on the table. Help me to enter into how you see it, because we've gotten to the point where I can't feel. Everything you do seems to be so off that I just think this relationship won't work. But what we're contending for right now is that in our society, there is something that's supposed to work. If what King did has affected us today and given us this space of unity, then we can also grab our tomorrow that we're reaching for now.
That's right.
Good.
Clarence, back on tension, probably most of us have been involved in some kind of counseling or been counseled, and both.
Absolutely. That's right. There's been a lot
Official
of mutual
and unofficial.
And
going on
talking
right
about
here.
that tension thing again, it always gets worse before it gets better. Okay?
Yeah.
And I think we need to understand that
That's true. Very
it's going to be rough. It's going to be rough to start out. But if we hang in there and listen to each other and then start to try to get proximate really to what's in your heart, it gets better.
And
Excellent.
that's what we're trying to do with the podcast.
That's right.
We're trying to dream together.
That's it.
And we talked about tension for a lot of this episode. But dear listener, if you stay with us, we're moving to a new tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's right. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, bring your cat in the room and
That's
make
right.
them listen, because this conversation is important. And we just want to say we love you. We are going to build a better tomorrow. It is being built. We're enjoying some of the riches of community across cultures, and we want to invite you to join us. Let's dream together, and we'll talk to you next time on our next episode. Take care.